Folk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? Today is Thursday, September 26, 2024. Let's do this, man. Yeah. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, closing out the week. And I always do this every Thursday, just to make everybody mad. Today is my Friday, not yours. Yeah. And so we're going to wrap up the week this week, and I can head in to the weekend. And it's one of the very few weekends that I have on the schedule that I don't have anything planned. I'm not taping. I'm not filming. I'm not traveling. I'm in town. So that means I get to do laundry. Yeah. And mop the floors. Yeah. I should post videos of that. This is what I really do in my spare time. Mopping floors, doing laundry. And it's going to be great. An amazing week that we had this week. Jason quit, of course, on Monday with Quitspiracy 13. And Tuesday, Robert Grant was with us. Another amazing show last night. Incredible show with Andy Marcial. And tonight, I've been talking about this now for a couple of weeks. Tonight, Eben Alexander is with us. And now, I'm sure that most of you have read his book, and that's what I've called the show tonight, Proof of Heaven, and know about his story. But we're going to get into that Jimmy style tonight. I'm very excited about this. And so I'm going to leave that part right there. Okay. I'm going to leave that part right there. Eben will be on with us in about 30 seconds or so, because what I want to talk about first is what happened earlier today. Now, I talk about this haunted house that I live in. Even though it's a new house, it's haunted, or a newer house, I should say. It's haunted. And I keep talking about it. And I'm telling you, I'm not freaked out. It's just, but earlier today, I was on Christina Gomez's show, Mysteries with a History. And at this, what I thought was a cool, fun, dramatic moment, everybody, this knocking started like, it sounded like a wooden door, a knock that we all know what it sounds like when you knock on a wooden door. Knock, 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 knock. And it was loud. It was clear. And it scared the crap out of me. And so I talked to Christina after that, or, texting. She goes, I went back and listened to it. That was just crazy. And it caught me by surprise. And I asked her for the video clip. I'm going to post the clip up, and so everybody can hear it. I don't know what my reaction was. I'll see it in the video, but I jumped out of my skin for sure. That was loud and crystal clear. So there you go. It's like, do you believe me now? Huh? It was crazy. It was crazy. All you can do is just deal with it. All right. So Christina's going to get me that video. And for those of you that didn't see it, I did see in the chat that a bunch of you did hear that live. It was pretty nuts. Tonight, Eben Alexander is with us. He is, of course, a world-renowned neurosurgeon and New York Times #1 best-selling author of Proof of Heaven. And tonight we're going to talk about his NDE. I want to know a little bit of his life before that, or a lot of it. And then we're going to go through the experience, and then we'll arrive at today and where he is and the rest of the world with NDEs. We're going to do all of that tonight and much more. His full bio is posted below over on our website. including his websites, ebenalexander.com and innersanctumcenter.com. Those links are below, social media, and over on our website. I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black. I can't believe it. Eben Alexander, and he's right there. Eben, good evening, young man.
Well, Jimmy, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
This is going to be amazing. I am so excited. Before we get started, and I'm so excited, I can't forget that you get the first time guest disclaimer. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. Which is this, Eben? Eben, it's you and I just sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. There you go. You have to accept so we can move on.
I accept. I think that's a great bargain.
Okay, easy. Yeah, it's an easy one. I want to start here. You and I were talking briefly before the show, and I'm guessing it was around 10 years ago, and I had the honor of introducing you at a conference, and I walked off we talked briefly before I introduced you. There was a lot of people there. It was like 1,000 people. And I went and sat backstage, and instead of going, I didn't have any, I had the chance to listen to somebody's presentation. It doesn't happen often because I'm working, right? It's my gig. And, but I sat and listened to your entire presentation and then went up and spoke to you after that briefly. But the point is, I was in the moment. It was a powerful, powerful presentation, and you could feel the emotion in the room. And so, and I want to thank you for that, for me being able to listen to somebody else's experiences and compare them to my own. But that's what the audience is there for too, as well. Do you feel that same energy coming back, the engagement from the audience and how focused they are?
Oh, I absolutely do. I mean, in fact, for me, the more we talk, the more you'll realize that kind of the scientific view of the world that I and many other scientists who study this stuff have come up with is the notion of one mind, that we're truly sharing one mind. And that is something that becomes very obvious when you leave the brain and body at the time of physical death, that reuniting with that one mind, including minds that have already passed, minds of those still incarnate in bodily form, etc. But you have access to all of that much more readily than we do when we're really kind of stuck in the kind of ego mind and the body here. So it's all about the one mind, and that we're all in this together. And it's that binding force of love. And this is a crucial kind of lesson from NDEs, but it has a lot to do with how each and every one of us can grow as a soul, is coming to acknowledge that kind of oneness of mind, and that we have a shared consciousness with others. And so what you're saying about the audience is absolutely right on target. It's a huge thing for me to kind of interact with the audience in that mental space. And I can feel it when it's really kind of connecting and harmonizing.
Okay. Now, I want you to take this the wrong way. You're going to take it the right way, but I want you to take this the wrong way. I think that the perception of extremely gifted surgeons and doctors, right, especially of the surgical kind, they are gifted, and it's like a fighter pilot, right? And there's a cockiness about that. And a pragmatic mind too, as well, because of the sciences and biology and chemistry and everything else. There's an immense amount of education and things. And you probably that group, and I'm hoping you're going to say yes, I was one of them. That the other parts about life or consciousness, or anything miraculous that doesn't exist, and then you are, those types of minds are a perfect target for the universe to come up and crack you upside the head and say, no, there's something else going on here. And when you hear that from a doctor, from a surgeon that goes through this, we tend to take that a bit more serious. were you of that black and white medical mind before your experience?
Well, absolutely. And there's so much to what you're saying there about the kind of focus, especially for surgeons, because you are, trying to really kind of meld everything that you have, all your skills and experience and everything, to help a given patient on a given day with your hands, to go into their brain and do whatever is necessary to try and improve their situation. And it does demand a certain kind of siloing of information, so that you can really depend on what you're doing, and you've got to be very sure of what you're doing. And yet I would say that neurosurgeons by and large are fairly open-minded, because they see things where they have to adjust as they go in life, and they have to kind of accommodate major new information in their dealings with patients and kind of the healing they see and things like that. So it's kind of a combination. It's a balance between that, black and white kind of siloing and hardcore rationalization that you're talking about, but also an open-mindedness. And one thing I discovered as a neurosurgeon is, to truly claim to have any kind of wisdom, you have to know the boundaries and the edges of what you know and what you don't know. And you run into trouble if you start getting too cocky and think you know too much. And so you've got to have a kind of a humble approach to it all. And yet, you don't normally think of neurosurgeons as being terribly humble.
I don't think any. Why would they be humble?
Well,
you've got a talent that is such a small percentile, right, of humanity. These hands are gifts, right? And those abilities. Yeah, I think you've earned the right to be a little cocky.
Well, I'll tell you, my dad was a globally renowned neurosurgeon, and he was a tremendous influence on my life. And he was one of the most humble, loving people I've ever known. And he treated every single person on earth as an equal, as a beautiful soul. And that's just the way he saw people. And I learned a lot from him. But, and I can also tell you that when I find the really cockiest neurosurgeons, what that usually means is they're hiding a deep core of self-doubt. And that's what drives that incredible cockiness.
Yeah.
That deep inside, they doubt something about themselves. So
you're talking about the neurosurgeons that drive a Lamborghini, right?
Right.
Oh, man. Yeah.
My dad drove a Thunderbird. He had a 57 T-Bird, and not a Lamborghini, but 57 T-Bird was pretty cool back then.
Yeah, Ford's a good choice. And I had this conversation the other night on the show, and I love this question, and I get to ask you, of all people, is in the entirety of the universe, is the human brain the most divine creation there is?
Of what we know on Earth, yes, I would say it very much is. But there's so much we do not know about this universe. So I would not even remotely begin to make a claim like that, given the vastness of the universe and a lot of the kind of edges that we can talk about parapsychology, about mind and brain, and this notion of a primordial mind that we all share. There's and plus, of course, the UFO, UAP, looking for extraterrestrials with SETI and other programs. There's a tremendous amount of ignorance. So we need to embrace the unknown and kind of jump in guns blazing to kind of discover some of these deep truths. But don't get too kind of cocky with our knowledge when there's so much lack of knowledge about the true workings of the universe. I find that to be the great adventure of humans in the current era, is this universe is wide open to reveal incredible secrets to us. And don't begin to think that the scientific community is even remotely close to any kind of theory of everything.
No. Or the brain.
The brain is absolutely a gigantic mystery, but I would say even more so is really the mind, when you realize that the mind is not simply a product of the brain and the physical substance of the brain. The brain is a filter that allows in this more general primordial consciousness of the universe, that kind of God mind that so many NDEers come back, amazed by and comforted by. But that's what we're talking about here, is that mind and how the brain serves as an access point or transceiver, but it is not the ultimate origin of conscious awareness.
That's okay. You've answered a question I was going to ask in about 3 minutes, and so we're going to circle back to this point. But the brain project that's been ongoing in Switzerland, which was, as you well know, the idea behind it, multinational funding and everything, was that if they put a computer together big enough to have 1 trillion nodes and match all of the points that are measured in the human brain, that it would act like a human brain. So they get it done, right? They get it done, and it didn't work.
No, it's not connected to the brain.
Right.
Not even remotely.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, for one thing, I don't think digital computers will ever be able to properly simulate all the workings of the brain, even admitting that the brain is not the ultimate creator of consciousness, but simply a transceiver. But digital computers are never going to get us there. Quantum computers, potentially, I can see a way that there might be an actual self-awareness that could manifest itself in a quantum computing environment. But we are a very, very, very long way from that. And all this business of kind of freezing the brain and studying the connectome and all that stuff, it's useful knowledge, but don't expect to get to the ultimate answers simply through the material workings of the brain alone. And there's several examples of that we can talk about as we go on. One is psychedelics, for example. They show us very clearly that the brain is not the ultimate producer of consciousness. And there's a lot of work that kind of supports that. And then the other thing I would point out, something I was not aware of before my coma, which happened back in 2008. But there's a tremendous scientific literature on reincarnation. Past life memories in children suggestive of reincarnation. One of the scientific groups that I'm very familiar with, I work with several of them. In fact, 3 of this group were big endorsers of our 3rd book, Living in a Mindful Universe. So they really like my work too. But at any rate, at the University of Virginia Division of Perceptual Studies, over the last 6 decades, they've investigated over 2,500 cases of past life memories in children suggestive of reincarnation. And of those cases, 1,700 plus are what are called solved. That is, they have actually determined the person who lived before that the child is describing. So if you go to uvadops.org, their website, you can find a lot of academic papers and books they've written. It's kind of under the radar. But the bottom line is the scientists who study this stuff and pay attention to it realize reincarnation is absolutely part of our existence. There's also something called program forgetting, where in the first few years of life, those memories are covered over. But the reason I mention all this is because ultimately memories are not even stored in the brain, because there's no way to explain all these reincarnation cases if their memories are in a brain that is, just now in this young child who was recently born. But they may be include memories from, for example, one of the best stories I know of, a fighter pilot in World War II who died in the Battle of Iwo Jima in March of 1945, and then was reborn as a child in Louisiana in April of 1998. And that is available as a book. It's called Soul Survivor by Bruce and Andrea Leininger. It's about their son, James Leininger. But in other words, once you start recognizing that the scientific data on this kind of stuff makes it crystal clear that memories are not ultimately stored in the brain, because there's no explanation for those reincarnation cases if the brain is the only mechanism of carrying memory forward. So we have a long way to go in getting to a deeper understanding, but we're actually making progress.
Now, did you think like this before your experience, or was this ever a consideration for you?
No, I mean, my father that I mentioned a little while ago, adoptive father, because it's important to realize that a huge part of my story is that I was adopted. But my adoptive father was this globally renowned neurosurgeon. Um, and I learned a lot from him, but suffice it to say that for all of his knowledge of science and physics, cosmology, neurosurgery, neuroscience, he believed very strongly in a loving personal God and the power of prayer. And he just knew it. It worked for him. He used prayer in a lot of his work as a neurosurgeon. I wanted to believe all that too. And yet, growing up in the 60s and 70s, that generation, I always knew that science was a pathway to truth. And like many people, I made the mistake of thinking that a Newtonian deterministic science was the pathway to truth. And that is absolutely false. Newtonian determinism and materialism has been disproven. In fact, the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022 was for entanglement. And entanglement, that kind of subatomic connection between particles that allows them to communicate across space and time in ways that completely violate our normal notions of causality in four-dimensional space-time. And yet the Nobel Prize Committee, after 4 decades of hard work by the scientists who proved entanglement, finally admitted that, entanglement is real. Einstein had tried to save the old world, the old model of local realism, as it's called. He tried to save it by postulating there would be hidden variables that would explain how these particles behave. But nope, that's not the case. If you go through John Bell's paper in 1964, and then all the experiments beginning with John Clauser, Alain Aspect, Anton Zeilinger that led to their Nobel Prizes, you'll realize the Nobel Committee has admitted that what quantum physics is showing us is that our notions of causality in a four-dimensional space-time are inadequate to explain all of what's going on. And there's also a tremendous kind of explanatory role that entanglement can play in the connection of minds across time and space.
Who the most spiritual person in the world is?
Who's that?
A determined physicist when the plane is going down.
Right. You got
Guaranteed.
I'll tell you, Jimmy, I'll tell you one little fact I ran into the other day while I was studying for writing a paper, and this was amazing to me. But they reviewed all the Nobel Prize winners for the entire 20th century, and found that in the Nobel Prize for Literature, the people who write books and fiction and all that kind of stuff, you would think some of them might be spiritual, but it turns out that only about 10% of them believe in God, of all the Nobel laureates in literature in the 20th century. If you look at the prizes in physics, chemistry, and medicine, you find that something like 35% of those Nobel laureates believe in God. So, do not be fooled by the kind of common misperception that the more you know about science, the less you're going to be a spiritually minded person. In fact, I love this quote from Werner Heisenberg, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics for the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And he said, the first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will lead you towards atheism. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
I'm telling you, it's when the plane's going down. It's when the planes go down.
Well, plus, just paying attention to life and to all the things that happen.
So true.
The best conclusion is really that we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe, not that it's a cold mechanistic world that operates by Newtonian determinism.
Okay, so take us through it. Let's go. It's go time. What did you? Okay, I want you to take me to the moment of all of this for sure, but we have to do the setup, which I will allow you to do. But the question is, and then I'll hand it over to you. Did you have any idea? Did you have any vibration that something that was this kind of paradigm shift was about to happen?
Not a clue. It really just came right out of the blue. And I mean, what happened was I woke up on the morning of November 10th, 2008, 4:30 in the morning with severe back pain. Thought if I made my way down the hallway into a hot bath, maybe that would help. couldn't even get out of the bathtub until I swung a towel over a towel rack, pulled myself up. Pain, baby steps back to the bed, collapsed, writhing in a cold sweat, just horrific discomfort. And soon my youngest son, his name was Bond. He was 10 years old at the time. He came into the room and saw Dad's not off at work. And my God, he looks horrible. And he started rubbing my head to make me feel better. I feel like he'd driven a white hot spike through my head. Horrific pain, indescribable pain. And that was just before I went under, because I know the last kind of thoughts going through my mind before I went into coma is I thought, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to have to go to the emergency room. And I knew colleagues who would come to the emergency room, and then everything cleared up and they were kind of embarrassed that they ever came there. And I thought the same thing would happen to me, that I get to the emergency room, they do a few tests, they figure out nothing was really that badly wrong, but it could delay my getting home that day. And so I remember calling out to Bond and saying, have a good day at school, Bond. And that's really the last words I said. And I was gone from this world for the next 7 days. It was an extraordinary deep dive. And by the time I got to the hospital, which is about 2 hours later, because my family thought I was resting and they let me rest. And when they checked back in on me a few hours later, I was having grand mal epileptic seizures on the bed. That's when they called 911. Now I was gone from this world. There's a myth out there perpetuated by a very irresponsible journalist that's trying to claim that I was in a medically induced coma. But in fact, I was in a coma that came from meningitis, and that's very important to the scientific interpretation of my experience. I went into coma without any sedation at all, and when I came out of coma on day 7, I was still under very heavy sedation. So my coma was due to meningitis, and that's very important to paying attention to the medical details of the implications of that. And also, it was an illness that was so extreme that, for example, there's a medical case report on my medical records that was written by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my recovery. And that case report came out in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease in September 2018. And they made it very clear that my brain was so damaged by that meningitis, based on the parameters of my neurologic exams and scans and all that, that there was no way I could have a dream or hallucination. I was far too ill. And in fact, I went from a 10% chance of survival early in that week down to a 2% chance of survival by day 7. That was a Sunday. Because I'd been on 3 antibiotics, I'd been on a ventilator the whole time without any sign of improvement. And the doctors just thought I was going to be checking out. And even though I had a 2% chance of survival, they didn't equate any possibility for recovery. And so that's what that family was dealing with.
Now, how similar our cases are. Right. And it's fascinating to me. Like I said, when I first heard your presentation 10 years ago, I was mesmerized, because I had never heard it this way, except, okay, we're going to take it a step further. But the other thing is, same thing happened with me, Eben. The last thing I remember, first off, I was in head to toe body pain that it was indescribable. I can't, and I lost my vision and the ability to walk, and it was crazy. So anyway, I remember I'm in the emergency room. They've wheeled me in. I'm in a gurney, and there was 3 doctors at the foot of my bed, and I am just in indescribable pain. I can't. That part I can't put into words. You understand it. Right. And but this middle doctor, little Asian lady, she's got a clipboard. Okay, we're going to admit you to the hospital. I said, what? And I said, for how long? She said, maybe 4 or 5 days. And I got a lump in my throat, like I started to cry. I remember that, and then boop, out. Gone. And I woke up 4 days later. You did 7. I did 4. And so the similarities between the two of us is pretty incredible. Okay, so did you know that you were in a coma?
No. In fact, a very important feature of my near-death experience, and I've never really heard of it to this extent in anyone else's experience, was a complete amnesia. I had no memory of Eben Alexander's life, no knowledge of humans, of this universe. I really started with an empty slate. And it took me months to kind of figure all that out after my coma, when I was starting to read the NDE literature and pay attention to it. But it also made sense to me as a neurosurgeon because I was just beginning to learn how ill I'd been and how my entire brain, there was no lobe of my brain left unaffected. That's why it was so important that meningitis was the diagnosis. And that medical case report made it very clear that, not only could I not have a dream or hallucination because of the damage to my brain, but also my very survival was a tremendous challenge to understand. How in the world, in fact, the peer review editors of the journal said, "How do you explain this?" When the three doctors submitted my case records, and those three doctors said it's because he had a near-death experience. They knew of other cases of near-death experience with apparently miraculous healing. There are a lot of them out there. When people come back to this world from an NDE, often they heal from something that is an extraordinary amount of healing compared to what we're used to in medicine. But I had no knowledge of Earth, of this universe going in. And in fact, the amnesia was a very critical part of my journey. If I'd not had that amnesia, I came to realize if I'd had a more standard NDE, I would have been much more tempted to reject it as just a wish of the dying brain. And that's why I had to go especially deep and have some kind of unusual characteristics like the amnesia and, of course, that guardian angel that I can get into in a few minutes. But when I
so your eyes pop open, right? 7 days later, your eyes pop open.
Later, right.
Did you have an immediate memory of what was going on with you?
No, it's actually almost humorous when you hear my family describe it, because for one thing, my amnesia was active right up to that moment when I came back to this world. And initially, I was not recognizing family members, things like that. I was trying to put it together. Who are these people? All I knew was everything I'd just been through in this incredibly rich spiritual journey, that's all there in the book, Proof of Heaven, that I've talked about many a time. But my youngest sister, Phyllis, who got there, I think within an hour or so of my waking up and they're taking out the breathing tube, said it was the most amazing thing. They'd spent this whole week all worried about me. And the doctors, more and more black crepe, we were worried he's not going to make it. We're going to have to take him off the ventilator. That's what we recommend, all that kind of stuff. So they were so worried. And by the time she got there, I was sitting on the bed. She said I looked like a little Buddha. And I would look at each and every person around me, doctor, nurse, family, friend, and I'd say, "Don't worry, all is well." And then I go to the next one, "Don't worry, all is well." I was trying to reassure them all. And she said it was the most kind of incongruent thing that they'd been so worried about me. And here I was coming back, "Don't worry, it's all great." But I was just beginning to get memories back as they were talking with me, and I couldn't sleep, at night. I was kind of wild, and the first 36 hours, I actually had a kind of paranoid delusional psychosis, which was very interesting. That my brain was still so addled by the disease. So after they extubated me, that's when I was in and out of this paranoid delusional psychosis. I describe a little bit of that in the book, Proof of Heaven. But the thing is, with very brief conversations with my family, I could tell that was all an illusion. That was not reality. And I could easily figure that out. The deep spiritual journey, that stuff was very real and very concrete. In fact, those memories are very strong of everything that happened deep in coma when my brain was completely offline. And it's very different from the psychotic nightmare I had when I was coming out of coma. That was really more of kind of a brain-influenced psychosis. But believe me, the difference between that and the deep coma experience was night and day, with the deep coma experience being an extremely powerful, ultra real, transformative experience, the kind of thing that allows near-death experiencers to grow as souls. I mean, it's an astonishing process to go through, and I got it in spades.
So I so much want to talk about me right now, but I'm not. I'm going to avoid that because I did the same. I had the same thoughts, by the way, just the same thoughts, and that part of is pretty amazing to me. What was heaven like?
Well, it started in what I call the earth for my view, a very primitive, coarse, kind of unresponsive realm. It was like being in dirty jello. I had no body awareness at all, but I was a speck of awareness, so I could witness what was going on around me.
Hold on. Okay. Sorry, the emergency alert system just went off here, and I was thinking it might be an earthquake.
Oh,
It's a missing adult. Okay, so
not quite the same.
wait, how crazy was the timing of that?
Perfect.
that was pretty strange.
I think that
Okay,
doesn't happen very often.
back to the Jello, Eben.
Right.
Back to the
So
Jello.
it was a very kind of murky, and if I had just gone to that earth for my view, as I called it, and come back to this world, I would have had a hellish NDE or a negative NDE, which are about 3 to 5% of all near-death experiences. Most of them are very pleasant and loving and incredibly powerful. I mean, they can start off kind of rough with a life review. If you've been, greedy and selfish and caused a lot of pain and suffering in others, your life review, which is usually early in the NDE, is not going to be a very pleasant thing to go through because you're on the receiving end of it all. In fact, life reviews are kind of like the golden rule written into the fabric of the universe. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And when we mistreat others, we feel the impact of that in that life review. Now, and given my amnesia, I couldn't have an Eben Alexander life review, but I did see life reviews. I can get to that in a few minutes because it's a little later in the journey.
Sure.
But from this earth where my view, I was rescued by this slowly spinning pure light. I remember it had a look kind of like ground glass, fine silver and golden tendrils coming off of it. And it was spinning very slowly as it came towards me out of that murky darkness. And it turned into a light portal. And the best thing about it was associated with a musical melody. And I came to realize that music, vibration, frequency is a very important kind of language that allows us to traverse these spiritual realms. Now, of course, music in that realm is completely far beyond any music you could ever hear in this realm, because music in this realm is limited by some of the laws of physics in our four-dimensional space-time. But that's an idealized realm where anything can happen. In fact, I think that's where musicians get some of their best stuff, is from any mind trick that they have to get deep into that kind of ideal world. But for me, this slowly spinning white light came packaged with a musical melody, and it turned into a light portal that led up into this brilliant, ultra-real gateway valley. And that was an amazing place. That's where our life reviews would happen. But note also that in a life review, when you go through large series of these things, people talk about how they can witness birth, death, everything in between simultaneously. That's one of the things that's so strange about NDEs, is you're outside of time. You're no longer limited by the kind of slow plodding narrative of a river of time that we sense living in these bodies in the material world, but you have access to your entire life and often can see previous lives, future possibilities, etc. And you're witnessing it not just from an ego perspective, but from this kind of higher soul perspective. So it's a whole different ballgame that involves a tremendous amount more kind of wisdom and ability to observe. I mean, when you can see all your life and all the interconnecting points, and you've got this kind of helicopter view of it all, things make much more sense. And you start realizing that there's some meaning and purpose. And that's where things like hardships come into focus. And you realize that in many cases, hardships are gifts. The challenges of life help us to grow into the higher soul that we came here to be. And that was something that was very clear to me, that some of the hardships in my life, this is later on because I didn't have an Eben Alexander life review, but in meditation, I do a tremendous amount of meditation and gone through kind of returning to my NDE and witnessing how all that unfolded. But anyway, in this Gateway Valley, there were a lot of Earth-like features. For example, I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing. And there were millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in these vast formations above this absolutely gorgeous, perfect meadow. There were sparkling waterfalls and the crystal blue pools. There was a surrounding forest. There were thousands of beings dancing in this meadow. Music, coming from above from these angelic choirs, emanating chants and anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness. And I remember early in the experience, this soft summer breeze that blew through and changed everything. Even though the kind of elements as I would describe them stayed the same, that breeze, I call it the breath of God or the divine wind. That was my first awareness of that God force, that infinitely loving and caring God force that we co-create this universe with. And that's what is so comforting to so many NDEers when they go through this kind of experience, is having that God force right there. And in fact, as I went to higher levels, I came to realize that that very force was the source of my conscious awareness. So it's never separate from us. But in the Gateway Valley, on this butterfly wing, millions of other butterflies, all the souls dancing below. And in my writings weeks later, I said there were souls between lives. And I was, the best part about it was I wasn't alone as I witnessed all this. There was a beautiful young woman beside me on the butterfly wing. And I'll never forget her look. She had this sparkling blue eyes, high cheekbones, high forehead, a broad smile, and this soft brown hair framing her lovely face. She was dressed in the same kind of simple and yet very colorful, colors beyond the rainbow garb as all the beings dancing down below in that valley. And in the valley, I remember children playing and dogs jumping. So yes, animals can be a very rich part of that spiritual realm. This is not something just for humans. In fact, a lot of people have beautiful reunions with beloved pets and things like that in NDEs. So don't think this is just for humans alone. This is really about all of consciousness, and all of consciousness in this world is even grander in that world. But it was that beautiful guardian angel on the butterfly wing, my spiritual companion, who proved to be so important in this entire journey. And her message to me, I think, was the main message I was to bring back to this world. And when I put it into words weeks later, because when it came to me, it was pure conceptual flow. She didn't say a word at all. It was like telepathy, but emotional mind meld. And that message was, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for. You can do no wrong. Although I wish I'd explained that a lot better in the book, because some people read that in the book Proof of Heaven, you can do no wrong, and they misinterpreted it.
What does that mean? Wait. Let's pump the brakes right there. What does that mean?
What that really means is we truly have free will. We have the ability to choose, and we can choose to bring love, kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance for all of our fellow beings and for ourselves, and use that as our guiding principles. Or we can choose otherwise. We can choose to be greedy or selfish or mean.
Rob a bank.
Yeah, we can do all kinds of things. But the thing is, the universe allows us to do it all. That was the meaning of that. You can do no wrong. But ultimately, if you choose love and kindness and compassion, you have a very straight, easy pathway, ascending towards that oneness with the divine. If you choose the others, for one thing, it certainly muddies up your life review. The life review is a reliving of events, not just a remembering of events. And the life review, as it's commonly described in near-death experience literature, is experienced from the perspective of everybody involved. So in other words, the life review is kind of like the golden rule written into the fabric of the universe. Treat others as you would like to be treated, because in the life review, you get on the receiving end of everything you dished out. And if you dished out a lot of pain and suffering, you'll be receiving that in the life review as a lesson. And that's why I was told you can do no wrong. But obviously, most of us would prefer not to be treated that poorly. So in other words, we need to give to the universe what we want the universe to give back to us. And that's where interpreting the life review is very important. And understanding that it really shows, I mentioned a few minutes ago how the modern scientific idea is emerging that we're all sharing one mind. we're all part of that God mind. It's the official name, I would call it, for this philosophical position is evolutionary panentheism. And it just means the God force is within all.
Right.
And it's evolutionary, that means we have free will, that it's actually evolving. All of consciousness is evolving.
Now, do you think, okay, I've got 3 questions and I'm going to try to, they're all different, but I need them all asked at the same time or I'm going to forget them.
Okay.
Number 1, have you seen Defending Your Life? The movie.
I think I have seen that. Yeah, I think I saw that about 8 or 9 years ago.
It's a great movie. And I'm just, the scene with Meryl Streep when they go to the past life pavilion.
Yeah, I do remember that.
You're right. And that's what this kind of reminds. Hers is great, right? This beautiful life, and his is not, right? And as he's watching it, and so I just wanted to mention that really quick, and I'm glad that you've seen it, because your lack of life review, does that indicate that you were pretty good, maybe? And then
no, not at all.
You've got a bad side.
No, I went further than that. I was going to get to all that when I went to what I call the core realm.
Okay.
And I saw life reviews, but I just couldn't see an Eben Alexander life review. Again, because the amnesia was the most important part of my journey. Near-death experiences are always tailored for the individual who has them. They have no other reason for being. But when you study near-death experiences in large numbers, that's when you can start to make some scientific conclusions that they are actually indicating a very real realm, because it's not all just happenstance. There's a tremendous amount of kind of knowledge and information that's shared in NDEs that help us grow as souls. But again, it's always for the individual. And for me, as I explained earlier, as a practicing neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, deep interest in physics, I really had to take a deep dive. And that deep dive involved a complete amnesia for all of my prior assumptions and beliefs to actually be able to harvest the lessons that I ended up.
That's incredible. That's incredible. My third question, before I forget it, and it's an important one. Was she, I want to word this right, was she a permanent resident? And did you know if you were or were not a permanent resident at this point? And why? The reason why I'm asking that, did you have a sense of self? You saw her physical side. Did you have a sense of, could you see your hands, or was it just all vision?
I never had any body awareness at all during the entire week-long coma. It seemed like I was gone for months.
Right.
I mean, it seemed like a very long journey, but it all had to happen within 7 Earth days. But I never, ever had a sense of a body awareness. I was simply a speck of awareness witnessing all of this kind of thing unfold.
Now, was she a permanent resident?
By permanent resident, I think we're all permanent residents of that realm.
Well,
we spend a little time here, but we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. So we have an ongoing connection. Once you kind of take your little ego mind, the ego mind tricks us into all kinds of things. But this is where meditation is so important, because that's a way to put the ego mind into timeout and start experiencing your higher soul and its connection across the veil to this primordial mind. So,
back to, when I say permanent resident, you're visiting this for the first time.
Right.
So
for me, it was the only existence. I didn't have a memory of anything else. So there was no notion whatsoever that I might be, dying from a life on Earth or anything like that. Because of the amnesia, I was just taking everything as fresh as it was presented to me. And that's how a lot of the lessons were coming in.
So I guess what I'm asking is, she does this every day, forever.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, forever is a very interesting statement, because remember, I just said that the life review, when you witness it, you relive events. In fact, about a third of people who have NDEs and life reviews, about a third of those life reviews, they go through their entire life. And you might wonder, how can that even happen during a 4-minute cardiac arrest? But it's because in that realm, you're completely outside of Earth time. And in fact, you're in an eternal realm. So That's why you can see birth, death, everything in between simultaneously. Some people call it the spatialization of time, but it's an extraordinary thing to go through. But it shows you that any kind of talk of before and after and time flow from our earthly perspective is not necessarily so relevant in that world. So in many ways, we're all permanent residents of the spiritual realm, but we spend time in the material realm here in these bodies because this is where we actually get the work done. There's not so much growth done in the spiritual realm. It's more of a place for the life review, connecting with souls of departed loved ones, planning next incarnations. What are the roles going to be? What are the challenges going to be, et cetera, to facilitate learning and teaching, because that's what this is all about, is for us to learn, for consciousness to evolve, for all of us to learn much more about our relationship with the universe, the nature of reality. All of that is what this discussion is about, and what NDEs are right at the tip of the spear in terms of examining.
So the two of you, butterfly wing, you're going over the Gateway Valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, it just must have been beautiful, by the way. Just I can't imagine.
Words. I mean, flowers, blossoms, buds on trees, everything very dynamically rich, alive. There was no sign of any death or decay. It was lit by these beautiful billowing clouds of pure color. Odd to me, though, that in my experience, I'm a big astronomy nut, but there were no stars in the sky and there was no sun in the sky. It was all lit by these colorful clouds. But be that as it may, that's kind of what my experience was in that aspect of the spiritual realm.
Kind of sounds like DMT.
Well,
okay. Wait. I knew you were going to go. We'll circle back. We'll circle back. Yes, I have twice, by the way, in case you're wondering. Okay, so what happens next after the valley? What was the next stage?
Well, the best part was that message from that beautiful guardian angel. But then the next step was that these angelic choirs above that were just emanating these incredible music, chants and hymns coming down, thundering through my awareness. That music itself turned into yet another portal. And I remember seeing I could kind of sense, the material world, the densest level of adjacent to the spiritual level that I was in. But I saw all of that material that seemed very small, that part of the universe, collapsing down. But then all of the spiritual realm, this Gateway Valley, of a place where, as we've said, you're already in eternity, where birth, death, everything in between can be simultaneously presented. It's what I call meta time. It's a different kind of flowing of time. But all of that collapsed down into what I call the oversphere. And that's when I ascended through this portal of light that went through these angelic choirs and was inspired by their music and entered the core. The core was as far as I went, but the core was a complete resolution of all dualities. We live in a world where you have darkness and light, masculine, feminine, good, evil, etc. All these different spectra of possibilities. Well, in that core realm, everything resolved down into oneness. I remember this, the universe throughout all of eternity was that oversphere. And yet that was, minuscule compared to this higher dimensional, if not infinitely dimensional kind of experience of the core realm. And that's where I encountered that God force. And for me, it was extremely comforting. I often describe the core as a dazzling darkness. That's part of the paradox. Everything resolves into oneness. And that's where I recognize that my very conscious awareness was sourced in that God force, a pure, loving, co-creative, source right there in the core itself. And every time I entered the core, because I would cycle through these realms multiple times, but every time entering the core, and again, these were not in words, but the words I used to describe it when I came back weeks later, I was told, "You're not here to stay. We'll teach you many things. You'll be going back." And that's where I would see many of these lessons just kind of appear in the core realm, and especially lessons like there was one that involved flying fish. And I remember seeing the flying fish, and when they were down in the water, they were like we are in these material bodies, in the material world, plodding along on Earth time. But then they come up into the air. And flying together there, they were in the spiritual realm. And that's where they go through life reviews and all that kind of thing. That's where I was seeing life reviews, reincarnation, every bit of it was in these visions that were offered to me. And in fact, there was a later vision that didn't occur on that passage, because I would tumble back down to that earthworm eye view, that very primitive starting point. But by remembering the musical notes of the melody, I could conjure up the light portals that would take me up first into the Gateway Valley, always reassured by that beautiful guardian angel. You can do, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. Witnessing everything in that valley. There were lessons taught there, but the biggest lessons were in the core. And then I'd ascend again. And there was one of the later passages through the core realm where I had what I call the Indra's net vision. And that was one of seeing these interwoven threads in this incredible higher dimensional tapestry that was being woven. And the threads showed our individual lives of sentient beings, not just humans, but throughout the cosmos, an incredible fabric that was being woven in this vision. And the weave and flow of that fabric was just the incarnation and then incarnation between lives of each and every one of us. And it was all leading towards this golden center, which to me finally made sense when I read Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's book, The Phenomenon of Man, as an omega point of consciousness, or what he sometimes called a Christ consciousness, that all of consciousness throughout the universe was headed towards. And that would be the best way to explain what I was seeing in this beautiful tapestry and vision. But it showed a very natural and organic way for our souls to grow through these multiple incarnations towards oneness with the divine. And it was a beautiful, very comforting vision that really made everything kind of fall into place. So that when I came back to this world and kind of reflecting on it all, it took me a very long time to figure out what the flying fish and the Indra's net vision were trying to tell me. It took me several years. But in meditation, and I try to meditate an hour or two a day. For anybody who needs a powerful tool for meditation, I recommend Sacred Acoustics if you go to sacredacoustics.com. But that's what I use. I've been using it for the last 11 years. Binaural beat brainwave entrainment, extremely powerful technique to get into deep states of conscious awareness and transcendental states of awareness. But that's what I've used to revisit my NDE, many a time in the last 10 years, since I came back and started getting into meditation to re-explore and further kind of understand my consciousness and explain the content of my NDE to my satisfaction. I mean, I'm still working on it.
Sure.
That's the kind of thing you never get done in one lifetime, but it's something I've enjoyed tremendously.
And I'm not making light of any of this, but this, I get into that same zone when I ride my Harley in the mornings. Okay. And I go out in the mornings. Yeah. I head out into the desert with no destination, right? Full tank of gas. I run out a half a tank and I turn around and I find my way home. But it's 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours of Zen. Rolling through the poppy fields and the colors and the mountains and the sky and nature and the smells and the things. And you mentioned binaural beats, right? Well, I've got that going on, between my thighs. And yeah. It's the droning. Yeah. There's a thing that happens, and I go there. And you know why it's so easy to go there, Eben, is you have to have an intense focus on safety. You still have to, right? You still have, and that's a life and death situation. So your brain is intensely focused on the mechanics of it. Right. And that forces you know what I mean? You are in the zone, man.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about because I made 365 parachute jumps in college on the UNC parachuting team. And we did a lot of free fall formations. And I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of being in a flow state and just this incredible kind of Zen existence where every second is just this power pack of what you're doing, flying your body with 30 other people building these formations. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. And I think that's probably a similar feeling to what you get, zooming through the desert on your Harley. I mean, that must be an incredible feeling.
It's crazy. And I try to describe it to people, if I have like 5 rules of life, maybe I'll make a video, like a 30-second video. Okay, 5 rules. Find your bliss. Be happy. No negativity. Stay positive. Buy a Harley. Right?
There you go. That covers all the bases.
Right. Now, I want to go back to the point of reference, though, because when is Christ in Christ consciousness, is Christ just a word that's inserted there?
It is because it's important to realize that our modern Christianity is not a perfect kind of projection of the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. So don't get those two things confused. And I came back, as I explained in the book Proof of Heaven, to me, God was a word that was packed with a lot of baggage. So I called that deity Om, because that's the sound. That's what I experienced in the core realm, this incredible deep resonance. That to me was the resonance that would happen in an infinite dimensional cavity, given all of eternity. I'm sure a music theorist would try and knock me over the head for saying that, but that was what I experienced as Om. And I came back realizing that it doesn't matter if you want to call that force God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, all the names we use as humans to try and claim some connection there. But it's really, we're talking about the same force. And ultimately, when you recognize the NDEs teach us, NDEs from all cultures, going back thousands of years across all continents, NDEs basically are about love, compassion, kindness, mercy, acceptance. As we've said, the life review is all about the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And you cannot escape the dominance of this theme of taking care of each other that comes out of these rich spiritual journeys that people have been having for thousands of years. And now they're getting reported in large numbers, and especially since scientists have actually started studying NDEs, as opposed to debunking them and denying them just because they don't fit the conventional Newtonian paradigm. But by studying them, we come to realize there's much more to this world. And in fact, like in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, we go way beyond NDEs. You have to move beyond NDEs to fully understand what this is all about. There are many other forms of non-local consciousness that go beyond near-death experiences. We've discussed the reincarnation literature. That's a huge part of it. But also people can have shared death experiences, which are just like near-death in terms of their qualities, but they happen in perfectly healthy people. So those materialist pseudo explanations, of oxygen tension in the brain, carbon dioxide levels, et cetera, throw them out the window. They're irrelevant. They're no part of explaining NDEs or shared death experiences. And then, of course, you have telepathy. I mean, something like 35% of identical twins have strong telepathic connections. Guy Leon Playfair wrote a beautiful book on twin telepathy, where he explains that 35% that you can have one twin who touches a hot stove and the other twin 1,000 miles away can feel pain and develop a blister. I mean, that's a pretty tight telepathic connection. But in other words, the evidence for non-local consciousness and this thing that I'm calling shared mind, and primordial mind, is all over the place in science. In fact, in quantum physics, it's right at the core of what has been so obvious or should have been obvious to quantum physicists over the last century, which is the primacy of consciousness itself, that there's no multiplicity of minds. As Schrodinger wrote, Erwin Schrodinger, one of the Nobel Prize laureates who studied quantum physics, made it crystal clear that there seems to be more one mind in this universe, and we're all sharing that one mind. And that's something that becomes very, very clear on these deep dives of near-death experiences and shared death experiences.
Now, okay, I'm glad you brought up Schrodinger. You didn't bring up Niels Bohr, but he's probably next, right? And and all of these great minds back then. And when entanglement was first theorized, and slowly proof of concept and the theory started to move somewhere else, all of those guys had a problem in the quantum world and in physics in general, and that's observation and measurement. And Schrodinger certainly messed it up for everybody and got it into a real thought experiment, because that was the problem. That was, and 2 days ago, Eben, 2 days ago, CERN announced that the Large Hadron Collider, for the first time in history, measured an entangled pair of particles. Now, they observed it and they measured it. Right? Now, this opens up all the doors that were the issues with all of those cats, because they all knew something was going on. Right? They all knew it. You can't see it, you can't measure it. And then certainly the suggestion of observation is going to change the state of matter, that you can do that. Right? It just messed. And now this announcement out of CERN, certainly to start to replicate this and repeat it, is another thing altogether. But how exciting is that, to be able to measure and observe entanglement? Well, that's a whole new world, isn't it?
Well, it's been demonstrated for a long time in these experiments. And, it all started with Einstein and Bohr having their arguments back in the 1920s and 30s, trying to make sense of quantum physics, because the measurement paradox, as you point out, even to this day, there are something like 16 major interpretations of the measurement paradox, none of which are fully accepted by the scientific community. So it's still, in flux. But you bring up, this whole business of measurement and the mind. That's the thing that's so interesting. And for example, John Wheeler, who was on the Manhattan Project, he was head of quantum physics at Princeton. And Wheeler had to come up with a participatory anthropic principle. Anthropic means, we are part of this universe. We play a crucial role in what we observe about this universe through our methods of observation. And in fact, Wheeler came up with what's called a delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, where he was able to switch, photons on the fly and try and fool them. And it turns out the photons basically recognize when they were being observed, and they behave in a certain fashion. If you have a detector at in a double slit experiment, the detectors, even if they're not turned on, if they're there to potentially offer information, they can change that experiment dramatically. And in fact, the way Wheeler interpreted this, especially in this delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, was visualizing, it led to a discussion about photons coming from a distant quasar that goes by an intervening galaxy that serves as a gravitational lens. And the photons can come by different pathways, and how you pick out whether you're going to look for particle or wave characteristics. What Wheeler determined is they do not have wave or particle characteristics until they're observed.
Until you watch them.
And so in many ways, you're determining the behavior of that particle all the way back through billions of light years of travel to its origin as to how it's going to behave. It's very mind-bending when you start realizing exactly where Wheeler was going and others in trying to interpret what's going on here. And as
Wheeler, we need more Wheelers.
Well, I'll tell you, Wheeler, it's interesting. Wheeler, to me, there he was talking about participatory anthropic principle, admitting that the human mind is an absolutely essential ingredient to understand and interpreting all this information. And yet Wheeler accused J.B. Rhine at Duke University of falsifying data. J.B. Rhine had run the Duke Parapsychology Lab way back in the 30s and 40s. using Zener cards. He had avoided the survival question about the afterlife because it was way too controversial. But Zener cards were something he could work with. And he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that certain people had abilities to discern these cards through, parapsychological means. And yet Wheeler accused him of falsifying data and then later retracted because Wheeler made a false accusation. But he also tried to prevent the American Parapsychological Association from becoming part of the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is one of the primary scientific groups on Earth. And luckily, the AAAS did let in the parapsychologists. But it's interesting that Wheeler had so much insight that he knew mind had to be more than just kind of something generated by the brain, with his anthropic principle. And yet he was accusing J.B. Ryan and trying to put down parapsychologists, and they were actually carrying the answer. In fact, parapsychology, a lot of the experiments have had to be far more rigorous because of the scrutiny that they suffer from the world at large. But it keeps their science tighter. And in fact, Dean Radin out at Noetic Sciences has done incredible work to show the reality of a lot of these kind of parapsychological effects. And he's done a beautiful job. But it's just amazing how some of the scientists, including Wheeler, were fighting this.
Yeah, those guys, you know what? Yeah, those must have been the most fun, crazy, gnarly, backstabbing debate conversations ever in the history of everything, because those guys were just trying to understand what they didn't understand.
Right.
And they had their own takes on it. But back to Wheeler for a second. Here's the thing. They were talking about the craziest science fiction woo-woo that most people would accuse our community of having.
Right.
But yet they want us to believe that a photon or a particle knows it's being observed and it's going to change, that it's being watched, and it's going to change its rotation. It's going to change its characteristics because it's being observed. You know what? That is woo-woo. But yet they don't want to talk about
reality.
Right. They don't want to talk about consciousness. No, that's too woo. They don't want to talk about ghosts or the afterlife, but the mind can change mind can change things with observation. It's like you can't have it both ways because it's the same thing.
Well, it's fascinating to look at that whole struggle of the scientific community to understand quantum physics. And it all began with those arguments of Bohr and Einstein. And in fact, Einstein tried to fix the whole thing in a 1935 paper. It's called the EPR paper, Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen, by claiming that there would somehow be hidden variables that would be, these particles would carry something that we weren't measuring, but would somehow tell them how to behave so that you could explain entanglement. And so that was 1935. Well, it took 30 years before John Bell in 1964, brilliant Irish physicist, came up with, he realized that you could actually do experiments and make a decision as to whether hidden variables or entanglement, spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it, was real. And he thought the results would all confirm Einstein. Everybody thought Einstein was so smart, so he should be right. So Bell thought that if anybody ever did his experiments, it would vindicate Einstein. And then several years later, that was in 1964 that Bell wrote his paper. And I think it was the early 1970s when John Clauser, who was a graduate student at the time, first contacted Bell, thinking that he read Bell's paper and thought, well, a lot of people must be doing these experiments. And Bell said, you're the first one to contact me.
Yeah, this has been on the shelf this entire time. Yeah.
But anyway, so Clauser did his experiment, and the statistics came out very soundly, showing Einstein was dead wrong. Entanglement was absolutely real. But then the whole physics community freaks out because they can't understand, this is way too kind of spooky for them. And so they kept coming up with loopholes. And these were various kind of, well, maybe the information sneaked through that way, or maybe this, crazy stuff. But then experiments had to be done to disprove all the loopholes. And that's where Alain Aspect, who was a French physicist who worked with very fast optical switching so that you could switch mirrors, while photons are in flight. A photon goes 1 foot every nanosecond. So if you have very fast switching on these gates, as the photon is moving from one part of the apparatus to another, you can switch the apparatus up. And that's a better way to do the experiment. And when Aspect did the experiments, he proved the same thing that Clauser did. Entanglement is real. The statistics disprove Einstein, disprove hidden variables. And then it was Anton Zeilinger in Austria who really took it to the next level. So we won't get into that, except that he enlarged the experiment from, kind of desktop to multiple kilometers on Earth, to where you were using stars that were hundreds of light years apart to set parameters in the experiment. And so there was no way for quantum information to be passed from one side to the other than what they were witnessing in these experiments that proved entanglement. So the Nobel Prize in 2022, they finally admitted this is reality, entanglement.
Yeah, the Chinese have been using that same approach with this too as well, using distant stars for this. I find it completely fascinating. And when I talk to physicists about this, there's a general agreement today about locality, non-locality, entanglement, and that this happens in real time, no matter what is in between or what the distance is. Okay, and that's a pretty extreme, because it goes against so many different things. But I think everybody is on the same page now, right? But to me, that's exciting. But to me, it answers so many other questions about telepathy, the twins that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. A twin that puts its hand on a burner on a stove, and their twin feels it 1,000 miles away or on the other side of the earth. I would say that is entanglement,
right? And, that's what I believe is going on. Exactly. It's this connection between minds is an entanglement phenomena. In fact, I believe that when you really get down to it, once we are much smarter about this, we'll realize that the very apparent flow of time in our world is due to entanglement phenomena that kind of connect what is going on, in this kind of eternal now that we live in. But that in many ways, entanglement will end up producing kind of our sense of temporal flow. I think it's going to be right at the heart of it. So in other words, to understand something as deeply mysterious as time, and believe me, time is not at all understood as a concept by modern physics, but to really get to the heart of how time works is going to demand a much richer and deeper kind of full understanding of the nature of consciousness and conscious awareness and our conscious influence on the universe at large.
Yeah, it's fascinating how far we've come in 300 years, from Newton until now. We've made some great steps, great progress. But the fundamental questions, like there's 3 or 4, there's a million, but there's like 3 or 4 basic things, right? Basic things. Who are we? Where are we going? What is gravity? What happens after we die? What is consciousness? All of that is still right.
But I think we're making progress.
We are.
They're probably all interrelated. So you really need to expand your mind. I mean, that's one of the reasons why in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, we had to go to quantum physics, neuroscience and the hard problem of consciousness, the binding problem or the apparent unity of consciousness in an individual, which is very hard for a materialist model to explain. And then all that evidence for non-local consciousness out of parapsychology, the telepathy, remote viewing, distance healing, NDEs, past life memories in children. All of this material is important to try and get to deeper understanding of the nature of reality. And one of the biggest problems in our society is we depend on specialists. And specialists are very good in their special field of interest. But something like consciousness and the nature of reality is way too big for any one field. And that's why in our book, In Living in a Mindful Universe, we really come at it from all these different directions. And all of them end up telling us that consciousness is fundamental in the universe. This thing we call the mental actually generates all of emergent physical reality. And it's that's what Wheeler was trying to tell us in kind of a limited language back in the 60s and 70s. But I think the scientific community is now advancing enough to where we can start really making sense of this. But it takes kind of a generalist approach. You can't just be purely, like just a neuroscientist, just a parapsychologist, just a quantum physicist. It takes a knowledge of all these fields to start to integrate it into a coherent whole that makes sense. But I think that's where we're finally making some progress. And it's amazing how much time we wasted in the 20th and early 21st century with a lot of prominent scientists debunking and denying all of these human experiences, which were trying to teach us more about the nature of reality.
Yeah, they were all caught up with electricity and atoms. I get that. I do. There's everything was so new, new to them.
Right.
Certainly the Greeks talked about this, 2,000 years ago, but the ideas that were presented, like I said, electricity is new and nuclear energy and power and atoms and things were something that needed to be explored at that time.
Right.
And so some of our brighter minds were focused on that instead of, maybe they should have split the pie a little bit. And let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this. Is there research into, have people had NDEs that were dark? I don't want to use the word hell. I don't want to use that word
NDEs, hell. About 3 to 5% of NDE reports are known as negative or dark NDEs.
Right.
But many of them, when you review them, you find that often what happens is just a really tough life review. That they had treated people badly, and then when they had to be on the receiving end of that in the life review, it was very uncomfortable. But the important thing to point out about those negative NDEs is they often also give you the same result, a very positive kind of shift when the person comes back to this world. They start making amends in their life. They're no longer, a jerk to people around them, but they start kind of living more of kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance. Now, there can be, I think, negative spirits that are very real. But again, once you realize that at the deepest level of all this, you're not finding some hell and damnation. What you're finding is this infinitely loving God force at the core of it all. And that's kind of the standard fare of NDEers, no matter what their input is. Now, one example, for example, Nancy Evans Bush has a website on negative NDEs. I think it's something like tiptoeing. I'm sorry. Nancy Evans Bush is her name, and it's like tiptoeing through the dark or by the graveyard. I don't recall the name of her website, but she has written extensively. She had a negative NDE, and I think she has a lot to say about it. But from my point of view, I think that they're incomplete. And a deep dive, as I said, if I'd just gone to the earthworm eye view and come back to this world, I would have had a negative NDE. But I went deeper and, much further in getting out to the core realm. So I had a very positive NDE. And I think
when you were in the Gateway Valley, right, and everybody's dancing below, right, and all this beautiful music, and I want to come back to the music. Charles Manson isn't down there dancing, is he?
Well, no.
Does somebody like that get a second chance, or do they automatically go to the back of the store?
Well, what I'm pretty sure happens in those cases is they have a life review where they have to feel what they dished out to others. And so someone like Manson would go through the pain and suffering of the people that he attacked and murdered, and other people that he affected. And in fact, every soul who experienced some sense of loss through the actions of Manson, that his soul would have to interact with their souls in a process of making amends. So it's not as if we, escape all this. That's why the life review is such an important concept. It really brings kind of a notion of karma to the whole picture. And I think there's a lot of reality to that. It serves as kind of a gentle nudge to bring society into a more mature, advanced, and loving position. In the current era, people, will talk about violent crime and this and that going on. Well, it turns out if you graph it out, violent crime and property crimes in the United States have been steadily declining for 30 years. And battlefield deaths, if you look at the 20th and early 21st century, battlefield deaths were big and large back in the 20th century. It's very sad that we have this, the Ukraine and the Gaza situation going on now. I mean, pray for peace. But the reality is the general tendency of humanity over the last 40, 50, 60 years, if not much longer, if you want to go back to the Middle Ages, I mean, things were really rough back then, but it is slowly moving in a very positive direction. And I think that part of that could be this process of life reviews gently nudging all of us towards more of an acceptance that we're all in this together. We're here to take care of each other. And in this modern era, it's become very politically unpopular in some groups to say that we should take care of refugees from war-torn countries and from violent countries. But I believe we should. I believe we need to take care of each other. And that includes taking care of the refugees. And just the broader sense of sharing love, compassion, and kindness and mercy for our fellow beings. That's what I think the NDE community is trying to teach us. And in many ways, given that the scientific community is now taking NDEs far more seriously, I think we all need to. And I want to give a resource to your people.
Sure.
And that is for anyone who doesn't accept that the afterlife has now been scientifically validated and proven, not just the afterlife, but reincarnation. I would steer you to bigelowinstitute.org. Turns out Robert Bigelow is an aerospace engineer in Las Vegas. He had lost his wife. His son had committed suicide. He was wondering, is there any scientific evidence that their soul is still really here? And so he put a question out, a challenge to the scientific community. What's the best evidence for continuation of conscious awareness after permanent bodily death? That was a question. And he said, you must show at least 5 years of research experience in this question to submit an essay. In that setting, they had received 204 essays. This is 3 years ago. 204 essays. He was going to give out 3 monetary awards. Well, he ended up giving out 29 monetary awards because the essays were so good. They came from all over the world. They were from people who were from many different scientific disciplines, parapsychology, physics, all across the board, physicians, everybody got involved in this. And at bigelowinstitute.org, you will find the winning essays. And believe me, once you start reading, you can start with Jeffrey Mishlov's first place essay.
He won.
He won, yeah. Absolutely. And you read that and you will instantly realize that all this kind of materialist saying, oh, this is woo-woo nonsense, are completely outclassed, because there's a tremendous amount of scientific data, very good empirical data, and rational argument showing the reality not only of the afterlife, but as I said, of reincarnation. And Mishlov's is just one. There are many deeply scientific essays in that group. Bernardo Kastrup, I highly recommend. He was an endorser of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, but he wrote an incredibly good essay that's really just based in quantum physics and makes a very clear case. Also, Dean Radin put in an excellent essay. Julie Beischel from Windbridge.org put in an excellent essay supporting the reality of psychic mediums through a quintuply blinded protocol. And Pim van Lommel, who won second place, Dutch cardiologist, who wrote a fantastic Lancet paper. That's a very esteemed medical journal back in 2001 on more than 300 cardiac arrest patients in the Netherlands, where he found that 18% of them had profound near-death experiences. And so all of these people contributed these incredible essays. So if any materialist scientist tries to tell you that the talk of the afterlife is woo-woo nonsense, all they're doing is admitting that they're either too lazy or too unintelligent to interpret the BigelowInstitute.org essays. But we have moved beyond the point of saying, well, this is all woo-woo nonsense, to a point of saying this is scientifically validated. Reincarnation is absolutely real. Just because you don't have memories of a past life is irrelevant, because the doctors who do that work will tell you you must harvest these memories from children before age 6 or 7, because after that, the memories are covered over by natural processes.
Sure.
And I think at this stage of human development, there's something about that program forgetting that is necessary for us to learn the lessons we're here to learn, to give us a deep dive into these lives and these bodies, and yet realize that there's evidence all around the edges through NDEs, through hypnotic regression, past life memories, people using meditation to uncover past lives, things like that. There are plenty of ways that we can start to uncover in our own personal lives how these things are relevant to us. But to society at large, there's no question from the scientific community that the afterlife and reincarnation are absolutely real. We just need to understand more about how it all works.
I got ripped off on the past life.
How's
Or
that?
the life review. I didn't get it.
Well,
I didn't get it. I didn't get the life review. But I'm going to share this with you for 10 seconds. What I experienced over that 4-day period, and I came and went multiple times. Okay, which I didn't know.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know about any of that. But I was in a black floating space. There were no walls. There was nothing. I was at a table, sitting in a chair. There was a light source above me that lit up the table. Table was white, but couldn't see the floor, couldn't see the walls, couldn't see anything. No. So none of that. Black void, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I did have. I was writing symphonies, best way I can explain it, by the way. I was writing sheet music for symphonies. And as I wrote it, it played by this wonderful orchestra. And so now I can read music. I don't write it. Obviously I'm a musician, right? Okay. So that's an obvious statement, but or an obvious observation, and you can observe this all day long, but you're not going to change it, Eben. Okay, so, but I was bathed in this, and it was wonderful.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was in real time. So I'm writing it. I'm writing, I'm placing the notes, and it's playing
it. Oh, that is so rich. That is so consistent with how I understand that realm, that it is so much one of mental manifestation, at a very soul level. And that's exactly what you were experiencing. And don't worry about the fact that you were, quote, cheated out of your life review, because they're only there in about 25 to 35% of NDEs, depending on what series you read, that you run into life reviews. But they go back, thousands of years. I mean, one of the earliest cases I know of, written about by Plato in the Republic, back in 240 BC, he wrote about an Armenian soldier killed in battle, who was dead on the battlefield for days, but he woke up right when they placed him on a funeral pyre, before they lit it, thank God. And he said that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, and that what you find is the only important thing is how much love you were able to bring to your fellow beings. This comes from a dead Armenian general back, 2,400 years ago. So life reviews are an incredible part of all this. Now, I didn't have an Eben Alexander life review, but I certainly saw them in those two incredible visions life reviews were made very clear to me as basically a moderating mechanism that assists us in soul growth and in kind of learning and teaching and learning much more about our relationship with the universe at large.
Now, how have you grown? How have you changed? And can you have your own little life review now, right? I'm sure you've done it many times. Eben before and Eben after. How have you grown?
Well, I must say, after immediately after the NDE, I had a lot of the kind of early microelectronic effects. Things like my watch wouldn't work. I had to go through 3 watches till I found one that would work. I'd walk down the street, and the street lights would go out when I walked under them. I thought it was just infrastructure. I didn't realize at that time that was very common in NDEers. My computer would crash a lot more than it did before my coma. Again, I thought it's because Apple had outsourced to China, what have you. I had all kinds of explanations until I started reading and figured out all that stuff was part of what happens to NDEers after the case. Now, in terms of how I changed, I think my intuition and my sense of empathy dramatically expanded by going through this. I remember when my older son, Eben the Fourth, who was majoring in neuroscience in college at the time I was in coma, well, he came home. He had been there during part of my coma with the rest of my family, holding my hand 24/7 while I was deep in coma. But then he'd gone back to school when I was starting to come around. And he came home day before Thanksgiving. I'd been out of the hospital 2 days back in November 2008. And he heard I couldn't sleep at night because I was so energized by my experience. So he drove overnight and came at 6 a.m., gave me a big hug. And he told me later when we hugged, he felt like there was this light shining within me, that I was far more present than I'd ever been before. And I remember, to me, the most important thing was I told him it was way too real to be real, because that's what my doctors had kind of hinted to me. You know, I tried to share my NDE with my doctors, and they said, oh, no, you can forget about it. The dying brain plays all kinds of tricks, but we have no idea how you're even coming back to us now. But you can forget about it. And so I was trying to forget about it, but I knew it was way too amazing. So I wanted to write it all down. And I remember telling Eben that, and he said, don't. He knew as a neuroscience student, every time you revisit a memory, you change it. And so he said, write down everything you can remember about your experience before you read anyone else's near-death account. And that was the best advice I've ever gotten. Thank you, Eben, for that. I ended up writing about 20,000 words over the next 6 weeks. And only then did I dive deeply into the NDE literature. And that's when I was absolutely shocked, because I found a tremendous amount of overlap and kind of congruence in the way people describe these experiences. Now, the details are often going to vary quite a bit, and yet you get this incredible sense of flavor that it's really a realm, and that it's about kind of soul growth. That's why we have NDEs, is for education of the higher soul. And, you know, the ego mind may not be used to all that, but you know, when you go through a deep NDE, your ego mind is stripped away, and you start getting that raw experience of kind of higher soul and interconnected soul, and that is really what is such a gift. But of course, that's why I'm such a big proponent of meditation. And again, for anybody who needs a tool or a technique, I suggest sacredacoustics.com. Binaural beat brainwave entrainment. It's incredibly powerful. It works at the level of the lower brainstem. And I believe because it's working through a circuit that's more than 300 million years old in the lower brainstem, that's why it has such incredible power to liberate our conscious awareness outside of the here, now, and sense of self. So anybody who needs a meditative tool, go to sacredacoustics.com. Full disclosure, that's the website of my wife, my partner, co-author of my third book, Living in a Mindful Universe, Karen Newell. But I use Sacred Acoustics an hour or two every day. I've been doing that for more than a decade. I found it to be incredibly powerful in helping me to understand my journey much better, understand consciousness much better, and come to a much richer kind of sense of wholeness and healing in my own life. I've come to realize, in your question, you know, how has this changed me? My prior kind of materialist focus as a materialist neuroscientist, well, materialism, it gives us all this false sense of separation. And this kind of journey shows you the reality of the primacy of mind, and that we're sharing the one mind. And that's where love, compassion, and kindness comes into it. And you realize that we're all facets on the diamond of the one mind. We're not separate from each other. And so to hurt another is to hurt yourself. That's
sure.
part of that golden rule. That's part of that life review. So that's why we're really here to take care of each other. And this whole world can shift dramatically as the scientific proof for this reality of the afterlife, of these incredible lessons from near-death experiences being not just woo-woo nonsense or imagination, but being rich, deep, eternal secrets from the universe about our nature of our existence and how we can come into harmony, wholeness, and healing as a planet, as a civilization, demands that we wake up to this kind of knowledge and understanding of our interconnectedness and our binding force of love and how we're all in this together. That's the kind of shift I went through from having a near-death experience. And I can tell you from having been to the meetings, say, of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS.org, another useful website, but I go to their meetings many times over the last few years, usually over Labor Day weekend. I skipped it this year, but we'll be going next year, we hope. But anyway, you go to those meetings, and I'll tell you, giving an NDE talk to a room with 300 or 400 NDEers in it is a whole new experience.
It's got to
You
be really
talk
cool.
about this incredible resonance. And I remember I used to think, when I get to the part of the story in telling my story about my beautiful guardian angel, and those who have read the book Proof of Heaven will recognize that she was very important to me in life, but I didn't know it at the time. It's only 4 months after my coma that I discovered her identity, and it has to do with my adoption history and all that. But I know at IANDS meetings, for example, people would take a picture of me giving this talk, and there'd be this beautiful purple orb right next to me. And up on the slide is this picture of that beautiful birth sister who it turned out to be, Betsy, who passed over 2 years before I even knew of her existence. And that, to me, 4 months post-coma, when I saw that picture and went, oh my God, I finally recognized that guardian angel on the butterfly wing. And my life has never been the same. That woke me up to the reality of the journey. Yeah, it was a no-brainer to go from there.
What do we do with, what do you do? Because I know you've crossed this bridge many times. What do you do when somebody comes up to you and says, well, the earth sucks. My life sucks. And if it's as beautiful as you say it is, I'm going to just check out.
Well, that's why it's so critical that people know reincarnation is absolutely real. So if you check out, especially if it's not really part of your kind of soul journey, if you check out early through suicide, whatever you can resolve in the life review, fine. Believe me, your life review, you will find out. In fact, I can tell you that people who have tried to commit suicide and failed and then come back to this world, if they had any of the major elements of an NDE, a tunnel of meeting souls of departed loved ones, encountering that infinitely loving God force, that light, any of that happening, life reviews, any parts of it, they come back here and they never try to commit suicide again, because they realize the beauty and love in this life is all around us when you wake up to it. And so that, suicide's a very kind of interesting phenomenon. It's not as if they, they're greatly welcomed in that world, and yet they generally end up repackaging a lot of the same issues that they might have found challenging, and they'll be in the next lifetime. That's why I must stress with people that the old Christian model, I guess it's mainly Christian, but some other religions also believe in one incarnation, then heaven, hell, that kind of thing. But that's false. And we come back again. So be careful what you do and how you treat your life. Life is a gift. And any kind of murder or suicide can be a violation of that gift. So it's best to really try and live this life, learn the lessons we can, do all the teaching we can for others, show the kindness, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness. But we've really got to learn to live together and not be so, in opposition to each other, which is part of the current political polarization, the warfare, and violence. As I said, there's been a long-term trend towards the better and all of that, but the recent years with the Ukraine, the abominable Russian invasion of Ukraine, which had absolutely no valid reason whatsoever, and all the madness we see in the Middle East with the conflict between Hamas and Israel, and all I can say about that is that both sides need to acknowledge that the more we can cherish and love the children of all people and take care of those children, that would give us the proper mindset for how we need to deal with each other, especially as major groups that might have conflicts. But we need to maintain compassion for the children, and the fact that so many children are being killed in these wars is an absolute abomination, and just underlines strictly how wrong war is. War has never been a good idea. I'm not naive. I'm not a Pollyanna. I realize what Hitler was trying to do and what was necessary in World War II. But we need to grow beyond this. I mean, the 21st century should not be one where we've gone back 60 years, 70 years into the past and are duplicating, the rise of Nazi Germany and its attempt to have a 1,000-year Reich taking over the entire world.
You're right about that, but I think it goes beyond that too, as well, in that it's kind of seeped into all aspects of life. I mean, you can have two kindergarten teachers opposed, right? Just fight. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be sports, it could be religion, it could be politics, geopolitics, lines in the sand, borders and countries. Yeah, it's really strange how we've gotten to this very gnarly us or them situation,
Right.
instead of us just being one.
Well,
I'm not a hippie. I'm not some flower child, awaken crystal Reiki. I'm not suggesting any of that, man. I ride a Harley. I drive a Jeep. You know what I mean? And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing with that. This I've experienced the other side, and I loved it. Eben, I wanted to go back.
I know, that's what
it was. Friggin', it was beautiful. But you know what? I didn't have a Harley over there. I didn't have my daughter over there.
Right.
I didn't have all the things that I love about this planet and this life that I'm in. I'm enjoying it, and I appreciate it. Whatever happens later. Okay. I got a little taste of it, but right now, let's make this place a little bit better.
Well, this is where we get the work done. This is where we get the spiritual growth done. It's not in the spiritual realm. That's kind of like an exhale and then a regrouping and then diving back in. But this is where we get the work done. But I'll also point out, in terms of your comment earlier about the kind of conflict and the oppositions that we have, a lot of that is ego driven. And remember, your ego is not your friend in this journey. And in fact, the ego is right there at the heart of addictions. Addictions that can ruin lives. Addiction not just to alcohol, addiction to substances. People can be addicted to work, to exercise, to sex, to love. You can be addicted to a lot of things that can kind of wreck your life. This is about not succumbing to the demands of the ego. This is one of the reasons why I highly recommend meditation. Meditation, going within mind, is a beautiful way to start to realize that little ego mind. I love how Michael Singer, in his book, The Untethered Soul, he calls that running stream of thoughts in your head your annoying roommate. That is a great way to put it. That is not your consciousness.
That's right.
That is not your higher soul and who you are. And in meditation and centering prayer, there are different ways that we can start exploring consciousness and realize that little ego mind is just a parlor trick. And it is there. It serves a purpose. It kind of protects this little body and the sense of self thing. But ultimately, it can also be a trap. And that's where addictions, in fact, a lot of psychologists in treating addictions will go through a ritual sacrifice of the ego, kill it off and allow it to be reborn in a much healthier form. So the ego is not your friend. Ego is right there at the heart of so many addictions. But there are ways to kind of rise above that ego mind and start to truly connect with that one mind, that primordial God force of consciousness, through meditation and centering prayer. These are beautiful ways. Of course, walking in nature, riding your Harley in the desert. These are also beautiful ways of connecting with that oneness of this universe. Whenever you're in that flow state, I used to get in that flow state tremendously while operating. I could be operating in somebody's brain and, 2 hours could seem to be 10 minutes, or the other way around, in the flow state, time dilation in all directions. But
don't we need the ego to keep us in check? Right? You have to know what it is, and you have to have some of it in you to know where not to go and what to do and what to correct, right?
Well, I would say certainly if the ego is leading to conflict with others, that it's time then to, what I do in that kind of situation is go into meditation and have a higher soul to higher soul communication.
Well, but you understand what I'm saying, though, right? You have to know,
and that's
what it is.
Is the ego does serve a purpose, but in many ways it's kind of a superficial purpose, and it can be replaced by a higher soul that is much more focused on the higher good and on soul growth and on kind of coming to a deeper understanding of our connection with the universe and any sense of shared meaning and purpose with others and with the universe at large. That is not necessarily the territory that the ego can navigate very comfortably or efficiently. And this is where I have found meditation to be of tremendous value in my own life.
Well, can't you spin it into good ego? Right? And I'll give you an example, Eben, right now. You have the ability to speak to the masses. Enabled, if you didn't have good ego, you would be introverted and would be scared to sit in front of this camera and expose yourself and speak about these things. So you need that but you need to rub it into bright blue, right? You need to turn it into a good aspect. Like for me, to do what I do each night on this microphone, it takes a kind of ego. Mm-hmm. But you just got to massage it into, it's like being the lead singer in a band.
Well, I think as long as we remember that the ego can be very toxic and very damaging.
100%.
See a narcissist, and especially narcissists get into positions of power. That is hell for everybody, including the narcissist. I wouldn't want to be in their skin. I would not want to be in their skin. And that's where the ego is torturing them no end. Right. And that's where a higher soul would do a world of good to help them rise above that very toxic ego. But that's when you're in trouble with your ego, is when you're getting in conflicts with others and starting to really just be fully opposed, never see kind of the higher pathway towards a good, a win-win situation for all. To me, that's the kind of thing that the ego is not especially good at. But I feel that as one develops and cultivates their sense of connection with higher soul, with that God force, with all of the spiritual energy of this universe, trying to bring benefit to their fellow beings, that's when, you no longer have an ego that's very toxic and narcissistic and damaging and uncomfortable to the host and all those other things.
Yeah, somebody just made a comment in the chat, and I loved it. I would have to go back and find it, that it's confidence, not ego, that I'm referring to. I like that. That's pretty, smart audience.
Well, I like your audience and confidence and competence. I know when we selected residents when I was at Harvard, we were always looking for competence and also confidence. People had to know what they could do, but of course, beware of those who don't know their own limitations and who are ignorant of kind of their lack of knowledge. So it was always important to see that somebody could recognize where those boundaries were and not try to overdo it. And yet you're exactly right. Of certain jobs, doing what you do, doing what I did in the OR, those kind of things, they demand a certain amount of experience, competence, and confidence that you can do the right thing, trusting yourself. But, I've known the occasional neurosurgeon where I think they had a lot of confidence and not necessarily quite as much competence. And so that can be a problem. We really want both of them.
Eben, perfect night, my man. Just a perfect conversation. And I know here's the thing, and I'm going to have Michelle reach out to you. I want to get you back as soon as we can. It'll take a couple of months with your schedule and everything. But we barely scraped this. We left so much on the table.
Sure, I'd love to come back.
Consciousness is 1 week worth of shows, and I want to get into that aspect of this. We just danced around it tonight in this very important conversation, but I want to get you back and talk a little consciousness, man. The feared word. It's like that. Isn't it strange? We've just got 2 minutes left. Isn't it strange in the world of hard sciences, the one word where it's the line in the sand, right? Consciousness. It's bizarre to me. It's just like everybody knows. It doesn't matter what you do in the sciences. Everybody laughs. Everybody cries. Everybody tastes. Everybody thinks. Everybody talks. Right? Everybody has consciousness.
Yeah, it's the only thing we've ever known is the inside of our own consciousness. We're not experiencing any naked reality. That's the thing. That's the big message from quantum physics, is there's not an objective physical world out there independent of our observation and influence. So that's a good lesson to know, and it should encourage people to manifest the world of their dreams. That's what we're here to do.
You're the best. Thank you, Eben. I want you to enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Jimmy. Thanks so much for having me on. Great talking with you.
Good to see you again. Talk to you. Eben Alexander. Now, links are below. Okay, so we've got links below on social media and also over on our website. And that's it for me. I get to go start my weekend. And I'm going to do that right after the show. So I'll see everybody on Monday. I want everybody to have an amazing, great, safe, fun weekend. All right. Do everything that I would do. Just don't get arrested. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you on Monday. But for now, all I've got is go back, Lee Tappy.
Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.